All right. In a famous line from a famous movie, Princess Bride, how does that make you feel? Seriously, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel relaxed? Does it make you feel comfortable? Does it make you feel like the world's going to end? Um, it's a pretty peaceful feeling that I get when I hear this music. Does anybody have any guesses as to what that was about from the words point of view? Wow, that's amazing. Absolutely, full points. I usually have treats in my pockets like snack bars or something, and I'd give you one, but that's absolutely 100% correct. Okay. So absolutely, the Nicene Creed, that was the Nicene Creed. And the Nicene Creed, we're going to spend a little bit more time unpacking because this is the part about teaching the foundations of the Christian faith. And not only it was teaching to the people who heard this, but it was teaching to the people who were reciting this. So when I think of a classic Gregorian chant, that is the one I think of because it reminds me of like these monks that are out in the rocks where there's nothing, and what they have to feed on quite literally is the Word of God. And so the Gregorian chant tradition came from this whole idea of giving yourself over to a total completeness with God. And so we have this idea, Cantus Gregorianus is simply the Latin word for Gregorian chant. It's a very particular style of music, and I'm not a musician, so I have to say I pulled this off the internet. So if there are musicians out there, and they can correct me later, but a monophonic style of music. That is, there's only one melodic line for everyone to sing. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. Everybody's singing the same thing. And the only thing that you do is you have a single recitation of the pitch, and the melodic directionality is up or down. So you go like this. And it's very calming to the soul and to the spirit. Probably started in around 500 AD and is credited to Pope Gregory the Great, who was the pope in the western part of Christendom from 590 to 604. Now, the interesting thing is Gregory probably didn't write all this stuff. There are probably lots of people that wrote in this style, and the style is exactly what we saw on the screen, where they basically put little boxes, and those boxes were the notes that they had, and they only had the one scale, and they go up and down. There's no whole notes, half notes, nothing. It's just the note and the tonality, and everybody's going on the same pitch. But interestingly, they suspect that it was just written down about 300 years later, and it was all transmitted orally, makes sense, for the first 300 or 400 years, and it was just for voices. So I don't know if you heard in that particular piece, there was some instrumentation. The only thing I found, and I was hoping Zach would be here, but he's not, drums were not allowed. Drums have never been allowed. Drums cannot be used with Gregorian chant. Don't know why, but that's it. So Zach would be disappointed. So from about the 500s up to the 800s, it was very popular, but then people kind of lost interest in it. And by about 1000, it had been pushed out of mainstream and into, this is why we have that monastery, it had been pushed into the real outback of Christianity, where the monks were. And so the monks, they never ever lost this tradition. And they basically said, we're going to keep doing this, and this is how we're going to remember and instruct and lift our voices in unity to God. But oddly enough, as with everything that's old, it's new again. And by the 1300s, it was back in style. So it got right into mainstream cathedral life. Unfortunately, by then, the Eastern Christian Church and the Western Christian Church had a falling out, and partly over the Nicene Creed, by the way. And the Eastern said, we're out of here. We're not doing this anymore. And so Gregorian chant stayed as a Western tradition from then on. So we now have, from the 1500s, we had a resurgent. By the 1800s, we had all kinds of instruments being added. but not the drums. And it was always and only sung, I shouldn't say only, but almost 99% of the time, sung in Latin, very strong in the Roman Catholic Church where I was raised. The priest would still sing in Gregorian chant for part of the Mass. And, of course, the Anglican Church as well, not so prominent in the Protestant Church, but still there. But here's what's really interesting. The Gregorian chant, Canto Gregoriano, is Spanish for Gregorian chant. And so the Gregorian chant got out of the church and started to become kind of more mainstream. Who can believe that? So it influenced people like Mozart, Beethoven, Handel, Bach, and we had our first Gregorian chant superstars. In 1993, a group of monks from the Benedictine monastery of Santo Domingo de Silos in Spain made a CD. And I'm kind of not alone. I was one of the 20 million people who bought this CD. And they got so popular that they had to start shutting down visits to the monastery because they were having itinerant travelers come and say, hey, can we come in and sit in on a recording session? Like, we're monks. We don't do that. And they got a platinum record poster. They sold, all these copies. And so the record company said, well, we'd like to do a Gregorian Chants 3. We'll give you a $7 million advance. $7 million advance. And they said, well, we kind of don't do that. We're just monks. And they didn't do it. So really interesting. The CD was sold as relaxation music. And I think Gideon and I were having this conversation, conversion by stealth. You could take it to the office and no one kind of said, what the heck are you doing with that Christian music? There's like, oh, that's nice. What's that? So it was really kind of an interesting inroads into the 20th century. It was #1 hit in all of music in Spain in 1993, #3 on the American Billboard 200 in May of '94, and stayed 53 weeks on the charts, on the popular music charts. I mean, this is up against everybody else. Boy, God has a way of working things. So maybe Gregorian chant is not that weird after all. I want to play you a second one, and this one does have English words, but there will be some similarities to the last one. Maybe we're coming out of the desert. Maybe that road coming out of those desert father places is leading us to Ottawa and New York and Paris and all those other places where Christians live. So I can have the second song.